Hello and welcome to episode 354 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. And hello, Ian. It is so nice to be back recording on our normal time, our normal date in what feels like over a month.
Yes. It's been a while since we got back on schedule, but here we are back on schedule. And as we recorded early last week, of course, news broke pretty much as soon as we had hit stop on the recording. And then also on Wednesday, which is our normal recording day, which we would have been able to talk about had we recorded on the normal day.
That's fine. I was on vacation. I was not concerned with any of that at that point. Yeah. But I had a nice time. It was good.
I'm glad to hear it. And I'm glad you're back. And we've got plenty to talk about. So let's dive in. This week, we begin in the middle of nowhere, literally. We begin in no FIR, because that is one of the FIRs, or the absence of an FIR, that the United States government has said, hey, be careful.
Oh, it's one of these again, where nothing might happen or something might happen.
Yes, there's a wash of NOTAMs issued by the FAA with caution that hazardous conditions may exist due to GPS interference and military aircraft operating at commercial flight levels without active transponders. And while this is not new, and while it has previously included a large section of airspace, this includes a lot of airspace. This includes one of the Mexican FIRs, two of the Mexican FIRs, the Mexico FIR, the Mazatlan FIR, the Central American FIR, the Panama FIR, the Bogota FIR, the Guayaquil FIR, and no FIR 1, which is the area in the Northern Pacific that is not claimed nor administered by any air traffic control, which is super interesting in its own right. And we should absolutely do a full podcast segment on the no FIR. I've been actually working on a blog post for far too long. So this is a good impetus to finish said post so that we can really talk about this. But no air traffic control is offered within that airspace in the Northern Pacific.
Is this the one that's off the west coast of like Peru and Panama? Yes. Who even flies there? Are there any actual flights in that no man's land?
Yes, that's the interesting thing. And it all kind of comes together because as the changes of how aircraft operate and the range at which aircraft operate has increased, that airspace has become a bit more important because that airspace is becoming consistently used by flights between the United States and New Zealand and Australia. So it's super interesting now that as there are more aircraft that can operate those distances, including aircraft that can operate from the central US to New Zealand and Australia, we're starting to see that airspace used more often. So it's a whole fascinating dominoes falling into place. But as far as we're talking about here, it's a hazard area. And not only is it a hazard area with aircraft that might not be operating with transponders, you also have no air traffic control support there. None. There are no options to talk to air traffic control when you're flying through no FIR. There are some bounding ATCs that will help kind of get you in and get you out. But once you're in there, you're on your own, which is super interesting in its own right.
Yeah, I'd love to see a time lapse of what does or doesn't go through there on any given day.
It's not a ton of traffic.
No, but looking right now, there's nothing even remotely close to that FIR. But there are a couple tracks that go between, let's say, like French Polynesia, I guess, could be, and the Americas. It looks like there's one air route. So not a whole lot, but yeah, that's a huge chunk of airspace too.
I don't have the total square area of how much airspace we're talking about, but it's a ton of airspace to just say, hey, watch out.
I mean, I can't imagine much is happening out there military-wise because, again, there's nothing there. So I don't know, just keep on looking out the window for aircraft that you don't think are there. This is so silly.
We'll continue to follow it and see where else we have these types of NOTAMs come up. In the Major news that happened right after we stopped recording last week. The NTSB issued I want to say rare, not entirely unheard of, but rare non-preliminary report, non-final report investigative update regarding the UPS MD-11 crash. This occurred because of the materials analysis findings that the NTSB got back. And the probe is now centering around the spherical bearing assembly in the pylon assembly for the number 1 engine. So the spherical bearing assembly is a piece, and the aft spherical bearing assembly is the one that's kind of in focus here. That particular bearing assembly showed signs of fatigue cracking, which is what we previously knew. But this particular update provided much more information on how the bearing failed and some information about what had previously been discussed as far as these particular bearings between operators and the manufacturer, which in this case, by the time that there were previous failures, Boeing had taken over from McDonnell Douglas for responsibility for the MD-11. But these particular bearing assemblies were subject to a Boeing service bulletin issued in 2011. That service bulletin was issued after 4 bearings on 3 aircraft failed in a very similar manner to the failure on the accident aircraft last November. So in the bulletin issued in 2011, Boeing recommended that operators inspect the spherical bearing assembly, but did not require any proactive replacement of those bearings. The NTSB says that Boeing found at the time that failure, quote, would not result in a safety of flight condition. Yeah.
Yeah, not great. I guess there just aren't that many MD-11s out there to pool your sample size to know how accurate your assumption is, because clearly it was wrong, but there ain't all that many aircraft out there to know that you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, your sample size, I guess, is an interesting point here. The investigators found fatigue cracking in one of the 2 lugs inside the spherical bearing assembly, as well as inside the bearing race. So these bearings have, well, they're called spherical bearings because they have a spherical bearing inside a race, so a container with grooves. And the cracking was found in that housing surrounding the spherical bearing. And where that groove sits is where the fatigue cracking started, and the bearing race split in half between the fore and the aft sections of that bearing. 75% of the fracture surface was fatigue cracking, while the remaining fracture was consistent with overstress failure, says the NTSB. As I mentioned before, there were 4 previously reported bearing race failures on 3 separate airplanes, and it was the same type of failure where the recessed groove began to fracture, and then the race split into fore and aft pieces. The 2011 service bulletin required checks during the visual inspections of the pylon aft mounts. Those are usually conducted on 60-month intervals to make sure that the bearing race was not protruding fore or aft of the lug mount. So mechanics, technicians had to look at those mounts and see if the bearing race was in front of or behind where it was supposed to be. The NTSB says that it is currently working to understand UPS maintenance procedures and how that service bulletin was incorporated into UPS maintenance procedures as well. One thing to also note about the update that the NTSB put out is that the FDR showed only the engine 1 fire parameter changed from no fire to fire. The NTSB also says that engine 2 showed, quote, minor perturbations in the data as well. Engine 3 remained nominal throughout the flight.
Is that variations in the fire data or some other data that they're talking about?
No, that is variations in the N1.
Ah, I see.
And N2. So there's a link in the show notes to the blog post that we have that is a continuous update of all the investigative updates. And so if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see that graphic there on the readout of the flight data recorder that shows the N1 and N2 for all three engines on the MD-11.
Yeah, not great, but I'm still waffling in my head about whether or not we see the MD-11 come back into service at any point at all after this crash. This initial report not giving me really much hope that we do see it, because this is quite a troubling initial report here.
So what we don't know yet, so this is another thing that we should mention. The 2011 service bulletin said that the replacement parts, so there's the original design, and then there's a redesigned replacement spherical bearing assembly. The bulletin said that unserviceable bearings should be replaced, but did not mandate the updated design in the replacement.
So they just said replace these, but you can still replace it with the old design anyway.
Correct.
Huh.
So on this particular aircraft, we don't know if there had ever been an issue with the spherical bearing assembly. We don't know if they had been replaced by a new design. We don't know if they've been replaced by an old design at some point. We don't know if it had been replaced multiple times. That's something we just don't know yet. And I'm sure that the NTSB is working on figuring out the precise history of that bearing assembly.
Mm.
Yeah, so we'll keep going on this one. And
might be
and
a
see
long
what we
time
can-
before we get the next update on this one, though.
Yes, likely. I think the next update we'll probably see is the final report in months' time. In Indonesia, an ATR 42500 operated by Indonesia Air Transport on behalf of the Marine and Fisheries Surveillance crashed in mountainous terrain as it approached Makassar from Yogyakarta. So that particular aircraft was operating in poor weather and had flown below the minimum safe altitude for the region. The FDR and CVR have been located, and the investigation is well underway. Following the crash, Indonesia announced that it will acquire 2 new ATRs for the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, in part citing the fact that the ATR 42500 that was operating this particular flight was elderly and not in great shape.
Not the greatest way to plan your fleet replacements, waiting for it to crash and then people die and then you replace it. But this one was really weird. Watching the track, the ADSB reports, it was reporting normally and then all of a sudden extremely sporadic reports. Do we know if that was a coverage issue or?
Yeah, that was just simply a coverage
straight
issue.
up coverage. So the last point that I guess we got, it was quite a bit north of the intended destination, but it was just very strange seeing that it reporting normal, and all of a sudden it's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 points reported for the rest of the entirety of the flight, which may or may not be related, probably not related at all. But
no, in this case, we don't believe that it's just purely based on coverage.
yeah, this I think came on the same day I had my very first ATR flight out in Spain too. Not a very popular aircraft here in the US, but that was definitely not great to see that news as I'm boarding an ATR for the first time. But very sad to see any sort of crash like this, even if it was not a commercial flight. A flight is still a flight with crew and actual passengers. So it sucks.
Yeah, there's no way around that.
But I still enjoyed my ATR flight, my first one and done maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I enjoy the ATR.
I enjoyed now 2 of 2 flights since it was round trip. So
you had to get back to where you were. In more conflict news, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency has issued a conflict zone information bulletin for Iran. That happened last week, just days before Lufthansa was scheduled to resume service to Tehran.
Whoops. I feel like this happens a lot, specifically with Lufthansa attempting to operate to Iran.
Are we blaming Lufthansa for...
I mean, maybe, but I do believe...
Because I don't think you're wrong.
No, I think back in the day, Lufthansa actually operated wide bodies to Tehran and then was one of the, if not the first Western airline to resume flights baby buses at that point, and then again tried. But this flight must be so wildly profitable for Lufthansa for them to keep trying to be the operator, the only operator from the West flying to Tehran these days. So if there's money to be made, an airline's going to try to do it. And it seems like Lufthansa is the airline that wants Iranian business. Must be a lot of money in it for them, but not now. Not
right
again.
now, no. So we'll keep an eye on this one. The Iranian airspace closed briefly for a time last week for a period of just a couple of hours. And that was long enough to create some headaches for some airlines and an even bigger headache for one airline in particular. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But all things seem nominal at the moment as far as Iranian airspace is concerned. As far as a relatively new United A321neo is concerned, not normal. In fact, missing a few pieces at the moment.
It's just a wheel and some other parts around the wheel.
And some other parts. This particular loss of a nose wheel occurred after a hard landing during a crosswind landing in Orlando. The aircraft touched down rather hard, but there's video, so you can watch that if you'd like, and touched down quite hard and lost a nose wheel. Reports also indicate that loss of a nose wheel was coupled with other damage, though we haven't seen any confirmation from the airline or any investigation thus far. It remains on the ground in Orlando.
Good place to remain on the ground, nice and warm.
That, I guess,
if
we're looking for a silver lining here.
Better than some of the other cities in the southeast U.S. right now, which are about to be walloped by a winter storm.
That's true.
Don't want to be fixing a nose gear while it's also sleeting and there's an inch thick layer of ice everywhere. They don't deal with that well in the south. So Orlando's
No,
nice.
they do not. No, they do not.
That's going to be probably a whole other topic for next week.
That's next week's
the chaos of the southeast winter storm, because it's going to be a big one.
Oh, boy. Let's stick with United for a moment and talk about a report from John Osterauer over at the Air Current, which says quietly at the end of the year, United Airlines converted 56 of its 787-9 orders over to -10s. So if my math is right, it's now 84 787-9s and 56 -10s on order for United. That's a lot of planes. And United says it's going to take a lot of planes on delivery this year. It says it's going to take 20 787s this year and over or about 100 narrow-body aircraft. That's a lot of planes.
We'll see what Airbus and Boeing have to say about that, because I can't remember the last year any of this went to any sort of plan. But United's got big plans for its XLRs, which, according to Ned Russell on a quote from the United earnings call earlier today, they are not trying to down-gauge wide-body jets with the XLR. They're trying to open up new routes and new lines and play around, as United likes to do these days. But the 7810 is interesting because that has quite a bit shorter range than the 789 that they originally had on order. So they must have a very specific use case.
It does have a lot more seats.
It has a lot more seats, but less range. So it's a trade-off that I guess United is okay with.
Yeah. Let's stick with some aircraft that United also has on order, and that's the 737-10. And there were some very interesting comments about the certification of the 737 MAX 10 and MAX 7 this week from Brian Bedford, the FAA administrator. Jason, you flagged this one. Tell us more.
Yes, this comes from a Reuters article penned by David Shepardson. Apparently, the FAA wants everyone to know that the delays for the MAX 7 and the MAX 10, it's not their fault at this point. And they're really pointing at Boeing. And the quote is, Boeing still has to do their work. We can only help get them there, but they have got to do the work. And they're doing the work. He added, I don't think FAA is the roadblock on the 7 and the -10 certification, which is just really interesting to finally get some sort of substantive update about what the heck is going on with the MAX 7. But I didn't expect it to be from the FAA saying, nobody's waiting on us right now. Boeing's got to dot their I's and cross their T's. And apparently they're very slow at dotting the I's and crossing the T's right now, which might not be a bad thing because we've seen what happens when Boeing rushes literally anything they're working on.
This is true. I mean, most of the delay at the moment or the holdup in the certification, as I understand it, and if I need correcting, someone emails and please let me know. But as I understand it, this is all waiting for the anti-icing fix.
Yes, the redesign of the engine anti-ice system, which if left on for more than, a couple minutes, could explode the engines.
Yes.
Which, as a reminder,
when there's no icing. When there's no icing.
When there's no de-icing, which, as a reminder, impacts all currently produced and in-service MAX 8s and 9s. So who's keeping track of that? But yeah, this is something Boeing has to redesign a major part of the aircraft function, and best to get it right and then hopefully port that learning back to the already in-service aircraft. But
eventually,
yeah, if they have to take their time, they can take their time. Airlines, I think they'd rather have an aircraft that doesn't spontaneously explode engine-wise. I don't know. It was just weird to see the FAA say, they're not waiting on us. They've got their own stuff to do.
Right. Speaking of FAA, in its other role as air traffic controller for the United States, it's going to get more money from the congressional spending deal that was approved or announced yesterday. I suppose approved too strong of a word. They will be getting enough money to hire an additional or begin the hiring process, as some air traffic controllers have rightly pointed out, for 2,500 additional air traffic controllers. How many make it through the entire process and become certified controllers is an open question, which has been something that has plagued the hiring process of the past few years, where they've tried to hire, as many controllers as possible, and with finally getting some funding here. But then you also have to get all of these folks through the process. And certainly as a rigorous process, not everyone makes it through.
Yeah. Every little bit helps though. And apparently this is a 2.4? No,
2.4?
2.4 billion is the money going to Amtrak, although the article has no additional details for what's happening there, but it is a good chunk of money, however much money it takes to hire 2,500 extra controllers, even though, again, this article from David Shepardson at Reuters specifies that the FAA is short 3,500 air traffic controllers. So even this doesn't come close to closing the actual gap. It does also, interestingly, include a measly $2 million for an independent study of the airspace around Washington, D.C., going by the crash at National in January 2025, which is over a year ago at this point, which I guess is good because they've got to figure something out at DCA, because the current situation of there's just always going to be ground delay programs and hours-long delays for basically every flight. It can't continue like that. I'll take the $2 million and just say, cut back 10% of flights every hour. No big deal. I'll take it.
I'll see if we can get that money sent your way, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. There's also $500 million in there to continue subsidizing the Essential Air Service, which provides subsidies to airlines for service to rural communities. So that's, $500 million seems like quite a lot of money for that one. But there it is. That one's always a contentious item on any sort of FAA renewal or budget negotiations to provide money to keep that service going for better or worse.
It's a big country and we got a lot of places to fly.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation again. But hey,
it sure is.
They fought off cuts to TSA staffing levels, which was for some reason on the table, and that didn't go through. So that's nice.
All right, then.
Yeah.
The FAA is also exploring plans to help make cell phone companies help pay for 5G related altimeter upgrades. So we talked about last episode, a couple episodes ago, the fact that we're going through another round of spectrum auction, which means that the radio spectrum used for mobile connectivity, 5G, will be even closer right next to the radio spectrum used by radio altimeters, which are extremely critical pieces of technology on aircraft that allow the aircraft to know exactly how high above ground level it really is. So when it's coming into land, it can say, I'm at 50, 40, 30, 20.
Retard.
There it is. Thank you. So what would happen here, maybe, is that incentive payments by the cell phone companies would go towards retrofitting aircraft altimeters. This is not a new proposal. It has been floated before, but the FAA is seeking voluntary payments at this point, not wanting to mandate anything and seeing if the wireless industry will go for that. We'll see what happens here.
I hate this. This is terrible because the wireless carriers already paid billions for this spectrum. This is the entire point of these auctions, is the carriers buy this spectrum, and part of the proceeds for that spectrum goes to remedying whatever has to be adjusted. So to come back with, the hat in hand to the carrier saying, can you help us out a little bit more to replace the radio altimeters in aircraft? Well, that's what the spectrum auction was for in the first place. I don't know. I hope the carriers don't do that and say, no, airlines got to fix their own crap on their own dime, because that's what they did last time and everything worked out and it was fine. Why should it be any different this time? I don't know.
You seem to have much more of a horse in this race than I do.
I have no horse in it. I just don't like this double dipping of selling the spectrum and then going back to the airlines to say, now you got to pay more to use it because we didn't think more than half a step ahead the last time.
What if we gave you a $5 credit per month on your bill?
Hey, I got a $20 credit on my Verizon bill last time, this month, because it didn't work for like a whole day when I was in London, which was very annoying.
There you go. We're on our way.
Now multiply it by several billion.
All right. Let's shift gears and talk about a continuing trend in the industry, but one that I suppose at this point we shouldn't be surprised by, but I'm sort of surprised by the fact that Edelweiss has announced it will add nice seats to their aircraft.
So yeah, this is really interesting. And I put a post out on Blue Sky the other day, maybe earlier today actually, about this, where these kind of weirdo, small, independent or larger groups, subsidiary airlines that you don't really think much about, they used to be the hand-me-down airlines where, let's say, Condor had Lufthansa's very old product on its 767s. Now it has a very nice new product on its A330neos. The same is happening here with Edelweiss, where it used to have Swiss's old A330 product, but now they've got new A350s, and they have also announced a brand new product, because interestingly, they already have a bunch of A350s, but those have, I guess, kind of an interim product, but they just announced going up market with very nice all-aisle access business class seats, true premium economy, very nice economy seats with all the trimmings and all the niceties you'd expect from any other really very nice premium airline. But airlines like Edelweiss and Condor, they're not known as being very nice premium airlines, but the bar has been moved so high, and I guess it has become more affordable for airlines to offer this kind of thing, where even these weirdo airlines that you probably have never flown and really don't think of can have what is arguably as nice or even a nicer product than their big brothers and sisters.
I mean, I'm not going to complain, certainly.
No. It's just, it's very interesting because Edelweiss, I think they plan to do this through this year and next year. There's a chance that Swiss, a very good chance, will still be operating its A330s with the product that's now 15 years-ish old. So its weirdo subgroup carrier might have a better product than full-fat Swiss, which is an interesting twist, because Edelweiss is supposed to be the airline that flies from like Switzerland to weird destination, like not weird, but leisure destinations like Tampa or Cancun, not New York or LA. But the planes going to the leisure destinations will have a nicer product. It's an interesting twist on in this industry that really has happened in the last, really since COVID, as these smaller airlines are taking new aircraft, which gives them a chance to put these new products on, while their bigger brothers and cousins are desperately waiting on new aircraft from Boeing and Airbus that just haven't happened yet. So they have the older stuff.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And the amount of the shift from kind of the upmarket shift of leisure carriers is just fast. And we've talked about this previously, and there's been a lot written about that as far as the economics of that goes. But I mean, now we're really starting to see it in the cabin fixtures of these airlines.
Yeah, you really have two routes now. It's either you're a Norse Atlantic and you have your premium product is a very nice deep recliner, the same as Air Premia, I guess, in South Korea, or you have just basically what every other airline has out there, which is a very nice full flat product, because there's really nothing else in the middle. They're not selling any more, janky angle flat seats because it's not a thing anymore. No one's going to buy that. So the baseline to entry to premium business class is just still very nice, and everyone benefits from that. Unless you're in economy, then economy is still just economy and deal with it.
Well, yeah. Let's go to Ethiopia, because the airline has announced an order for an additional 9 787-9s, which is all well and good. But the announcement sort of coincided with the groundbreaking on the new Bishoftu International Airport. That happened on the 10th of January. And this airport I think, can only be described as bonkers.
What makes it bonkers? Is it the video or the idea of this airport?
I mean, just the design. So the airport is going to be built in 2 phases. The first phase is scheduled to open in 2030.
Which is like 4 years from now? So
yes,
they're probably already shoveling ground?
Yes, now, like this week or last week. 660,000 square meter terminal and 2 runways that will serve 60 million passengers annually.
In 4 years.
That's 4 years.
Not a chance in hell does that happen. Not a chance in hell do you build something that size in 4 years in this current, I'm waving my hands around, whatever is going on, because nothing happens that quickly.
That's what they say.
I say lots of things, but it doesn't make it true.
And then there will be a second phase that will allow for 110 million passengers annually, with 4 runways and parking spaces for 270 aircraft. The Ethiopian Prime Minister says that this will be the largest aviation infrastructure project in Africa's history. We haven't even talked about the design of this airport.
It seems ambitious. I don't know. Why do they need space for 270 aircraft? How many aircraft does Ethiopia even have?
What they are trying to do is retrench their status as the hub of Africa.
How does this compare to Dubai World Central, that thing that never really happened? Like physically, it sounds very similar to that kind of plan, which, as we all know, did not go well.
Well, I think one of the things here is that both the government and the airline are very much in step. The airport is being designed specifically for these purposes. And to make you happy, Jason, there will be high-speed rail connecting the
to what?
Existing airport, downtown, Addis, and the new airport.
Hey, that's great, I guess. What is bonkers about this design, though? Tell me more.
It is an incredibly sweeping design. There is a central spine built into the terminal area that then goes out to the gates. And it's light, it's airy, it's enormous. I will put a link to the video that they put out because you have to see this to believe it. It is going to be so big, and it's going to take you forever to get from the entrance to your plane.
Yeah, that's one of the critiques about one of the other more recent mega airports, and that would be Istanbul has such a reputation for it just feels like it's really big for the sake of being really big, and it doesn't need to be that big, but it is anyway, and it's kind of a pain to get around because it's so big. I hope Ethiopia isn't kind of taking that same route of just making it huge for the sake of it and not actually functionally large because it needs to be large. But hey, they've got 4 years to make it work.
There you go. And they will somehow.
Sure.
Let's head to India, where Indian regulators have fined Indigo $2.5 million for the December meltdown that related to the changes in crew rest that Indigo was not prepared to properly accommodate. They've received a $2.5 million fine, and the regulators have told senior leadership of the airline to do better or else.
Sure. What's the else?
I think they get fired.
Oh,
or
accountability?
removed.
Weird.
Yes,
How
I think that there might be
strange.
some accountability here
I
if
thought
they
we
don't
were,
improve.
at least here in the U.S., we're in the business of no accountability and just making fines that were already issued just go away, because who needs accountability? This one is particularly egregious because they knew it was coming and they still ended up in a meltdown situation anyway. But what else is going on there?
In other not great news, an Air India A350 has been significantly damaged by a baggage container that was sucked into one of its engines.
This wasn't the first brand new to Air India spec A350 they just took, was it?
I don't think so.
Oh, good.
I will double check the registration. But in this particular case, the aircraft was on its way to Europe and had to turn back because Iranian airspace closed.
Whoops.
Then, after they landed back in Delhi, it was a situation where the visibility was quite low, about 100 to 200 meters because of fog. In that period, the aircraft was at a stop. The baggage cart drove by, the baggage container fell off, and then it got sucked into the engine.
Ooh, that poor A350s they're out there saying, I'm not even supposed to be here today. And what a bad outcome.
I wasn't even supposed to work today.
Whoops. Oh, well. Got to watch out for those cargo containers on low visibility. They'll get you.
Jason?
Yes.
Is it bad to impersonate a pilot or a flight attendant in order to get free flights?
Only if you get caught.
For legal purposes, we have to say it's bad no matter what.
It's bad, but it's especially bad if you do it hundreds of times and then get caught.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. A New York Times article picked up on, I guess, an indictment or an arrest from federal prosecutors here in the U.S. charging a Canadian man with wire fraud for a scheme which they say he pretended to be a pilot and a flight attendant to get hundreds of trips for free. Now, this is interesting because the indictment was filed in Hawaii, which I just feel is quite exotic. That's because this person, who used to actually apparently be a flight attendant for a Canadian airline, was caught using fake ID to travel on what they say airlines based out of Honolulu, Chicago, and Fort Worth. Not too difficult to piece together which airlines these probably are. I would guess Hawaiian, United, and American. Doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. But this person previously worked for a Toronto-based airline as a flight attendant. I'm not actually sure which airline is based out of Toronto. It potentially Porter, because I'm pretty sure it's not Air Canada. But which airline's actually based out of Toronto? I'm not sure. Do you know?
I guess it would have to be Porter.
I guess maybe Air Transit was based out of Toronto. I'm not sure. But anyway, this person was arrested in Panama on January 15th, extradited to the U.S., and pleaded not guilty to the charges. But this was not great. This person often requested the jump seat in the cockpit, which is typically reserved for off-duty pilots or trainees or dispatchers here in the U.S. And they're not quite sure how many flights this person took, but apparently it was hundreds. Really, I mean, if you want to do that, just be a flight attendant. Just keep working or do whatever and get those rights legally. But all sorts of questions raised on how this person could have done this hundreds and hundreds of times using either a fake or expired or invalid ID.
Is this person's name Frank Abagnale?
It is not, but it is mentioned in the opening sentence of this New York Times article, because of course it is.
Of course it is.
And I guess you can still pull off the same shenanigans here in 2026.
In racking my brain, it could have been Sunwing, depending on when they were
interesting. That's true.
A flight attendant.
Or where was Lynx based? Was that Toronto?
It was Calgary?
I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. The important thing is don't do that.
Yes. And more importantly, if you really want to fly, we know where you can acquire an aircraft.
We sure do. This one's actually old enough to possibly be a candidate for Pechmo Air. But the last commercially operated 747 SP is now available for sale or lease. It's currently owned and operated by Las Vegas Sands Group and has been for quite some time. Built in 1980 MSN 21961 has recently undergone a C-check. It features a VVIP interior suitable for 60 guests and, based on the photos, features a free bowl of Granny Smith apples.
I was wondering where you were going with that. In the show notes, I guess they had some apples on display, but
lots of apples.
This aircraft started its life years before I was even born, in March 1980 with TWA. So that should tell you a thing or two about how old this aircraft is. But I'm kind of confused on why they would have put this aircraft through a likely very expensive C-check only to then ground it and list it for sale. That's some not great logistics there.
I think no one was going to buy it if they had to put it through a C-check.
Nobody still might buy it. It's still a 46.1-year-old 747 SP. So even if it is freshly checked, like, is anyone really going to buy this thing?
I don't know.
I hope they do. I genuinely hope they do. I
hope someone who listens to this podcast buys it and then offers us a ride.
I just can't imagine why you would buy it other than, for the cool factor. But that's a very expensive humble brag to buy that. But I hope someone does.
I hope someone does. And that's not even the biggest money pit we're going to talk about this week, because as it turns out, the Argentinian government is quietly exploring selling a 51% stake in Aerolíneas Argentinas. That's according to the good folks over at CH Aviation.
Okay, this is the least of the crazy privatization schemes for a nationalized airline we've heard recently. Like Air India, that came with a lot of baggage. Pakistan International Airlines, that's just a bad idea for anyone involved. But this one, I feel like, they probably haven't made money in a long time, but they've got a fleet of usable airplanes, a whole bunch of MAX 8s too, and some A330s. So this is something a competent buyer could probably turn around and make money from in a decade or three.
Yeah. The thing here is that the government is legally prohibited right now from selling more than 49%.
So it won't be a majority stake. You'll just have 49% of the responsibility.
Yeah. So good luck to anyone who even considers this, especially given the political situation in Argentina right now. It would be fraught at best to try and take this on. But good luck to whoever decides that they want to.
Is it you?
It is decidedly not me. Decidedly not.
Private organizations have taken on far wackier airlines than an Argentinian-based airline. So, I don't know. It seems possible. Could be fun to watch.
Jason's up for a challenge. Good luck, sir.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I don't think so.
All right. Well, on our regularly scheduled time, which means Thursday is the day that news will break because we are back here on Wednesday. So when you listen to the podcast on Friday, something will have happened on Thursday, nearly guaranteed.
Of course.
Until next week, then, this has been episode 354 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.